Hello there, Joe Pryor again, and thanks for sitting through those last few on financing and just, the ways to think about debt, and I think that's always important. But I also want to go into what I would call the 10 red flags for real estate investors that, pitfalls that you need to avoid. And again, there can be more than this, but, there's just some that over my almost 35 years just seems to come up more often than not. Let's put it that way. These are probably what I call, again, the greatest hits. So, number one, pie in the sky, something that is so out there from a price point of view, that somebody wants you to buy. The thing is, maybe you're working with a realtor and there's another realtor on the other end, and the other realtor really, wants to make a little more money off of you, I guess, or whatever. But, something, asking for real comps. And, I'd like to know the whole neighborhood for that. I will tell you from experience, I know that sometimes realtors cherry pick. And I want to see a trend line. And so if they show me 3 sales, I want to see 20. I'm sorry, give me the whole neighborhood. I want to know kind of what's going on there. And then I can start asking some more questions. Well, why are these numbers not quite right? Why are these selling there, at these prices? Maybe it's a terrible location. Maybe it's the first house, that comes into the neighborhood that nobody wants because it's just a big traffic pattern. Maybe it backs up to a busy street. I don't know. There's got to be a reason for it, but you need to do your due diligence so that you can see in a very wide angle in that neighborhood what things are selling for. And then consider location, size, and condition, of course. This is most important. The basic ideas that I use, and I was certified as an appraiser a long time ago, by the way. I'll tell you what, it's a lot tougher right now. But I wanted to know appraisal guidelines. It helped me in terms of valuing property. So at that time, I knew that, look, we need to go back 6 months or less. We need to go within 20% maximum of the square footage. Something is 1,500 square feet, go down 20, go up 20. You're trying to find similar properties, things that are, as close to the subject property as possible. And so knowing these things, of course, have helped me a lot, but it's something that can help you a lot if you'll see more data. And that's extremely important. And something, you've got to divorce emotions from this, okay? It is, I love the way that house looks. I love the dormers. I love whatever. I don't care. I mean, if the dormers give you better curb appeal, fantastic, but don't let it influence your decision. Let the property manager say, that location, that size, that number of bedrooms, that location, those amenities, those schools, those what make that value there. And by the way, it is not overpriced. This is the worst thing you can do. The other thing is, you want to know about vacancy. You want to find out. And this is the problem sometimes in terms of really finding, the real numbers about vacancy. And so this is where the property manager is extremely important. One of the red flags is, somebody's not controlling their neighborhood very well. That's a new neighborhood. Maybe the builder or builders in that neighborhood say, I don't care who buys in here. All of a sudden you got 35%, investment property. I've seen neighborhoods more. And that can be a real problem because supply and demand really does work. Too much supply, demand is not going to be equal, and prices are going to be affected, and rentals are going to be affected, and vacancy is going to be affected. So we got to know about the rental demand in the area, and we got to see that and weigh that on the impact of cash flow and your investment return. The worst thing you can do is go into a neighborhood that's not capped in some way, either officially or unofficially by property management. So know that that's extremely important. Overpriced house, number one, but vacancy rate, something that is going to really hurt you, is number two. Now, this is extreme. I know, I wanted to find a picture that showed something that, wow, this has got real foundation problems. But understand this, foundation problems can be huge, all right? They can be minor, and something, piers can be okay, but something, you need to know the history of a property. If there's anything about the number of piers that were put in, or was it done properly, it's a situation where when you see a house and it looks pretty good, and by the way, if it's an all brick house and there's a few cracks, that really happens. If you've got soil that's got a lot of clay in it, things are going to move. There can be little cracks. That's not a problem. But what you need, if you see anything or the inspector sees anything that looks abnormal, then it's time to get an engineer in there, somebody that can really look at it and say, wow, this is a real problem. Or, hey, you can spend $2,000 on piers. That's the only thing that I see. It's $20,000, $30,000, $40,000, $50,000. It's a runaway time. Foundation is extremely important. And you want to get disclosures, but this is the whole point of getting inspections. Now, again, licensed inspectors that are not engineers, all they can do is say, look, this looks abnormal to me, and I would recommend you get a structural engineer. I would listen to them and have a structural engineer. It's better to spend that $300, $600, whatever it costs, because otherwise the expense can be incredible. Outdated systems. So if you're buying existing properties, and I just am finishing up with 3 duplexes were built in 2009 on investors buying them. And, and one of the things that we looked at is that the roofs were updated, the central heat and air was updated, the electrical system had, was adequate, because when you're running everything and it's 100 degrees and the air conditioning is going like crazy, you want to know that you have a system that'll handle all those things. So one of the things you need to look into is what we call capital expenses, capital improvements. Older properties can be okay, but you need to consider the fact that down the road, you may have a significant expense. And so, even if it's in working condition, all right, but somebody says, hey, this air conditioning system, this heat and air is 15 years old, 18 years is usable life. It may take another 15 years for something to happen, but looking at the worst case scenario, you've got to look at that and say, well, I need to factor that in. So check the central heat and air, the hot water tank, whether it's something that actually uses like natural gas and water. There's some tankless systems, electrical systems, plumbing, roof. Make sure that even if they work, that you understand what potential expenses are going to be. Environmental hazards, okay? There can be mold, there can be asbestos, there can be lead-based paint. And so these are the things that you need to look into. Investigate potential flood, earthquake, or fire risk. The thing is, this is something that's happening everywhere right now, and so we need to know about that. And, consider the cost of remediation or insurance. If you're buying in somewhere that's on the Atlantic Ocean, it may just really kill your investment because the cost of hurricane insurance is just too great. So environmental hazards are something that you need to really look at very seriously. I tell people, don't go next to an oil field, or something of that nature. There's all sorts of ways that you can evaluate this, but that's another thing. Poor neighborhood conditions. Now, a realtor, at least things that haven't changed up to this point, they can't tell you what the crime rate is. What they can tell you, investigate it. There's plenty of websites that'll do that. You don't want to see that. If you see declining property values, that says something. Limited access to amenities and services, that says something. Properties not being properly maintained, or the lawns mowed, or things looking run down. Again, what is the crime rate? And, you've driven this neighborhood and you say, my God, there's 100 homes in here and 20 are for sale. That's a lot, Is there a good or a bad reason for that? So you need to really look at this. High negative cash flow, all right? Basically what it's saying is this is an owner-occupant neighborhood for people who want to live there. It's not for you. If you got $500 negative cash flow, people were selling this before the meltdown in 2008. Oh, don't worry. You're going to lose $20,000 a year. You're going to make $100. Come on. It doesn't work that way. A little bit of negative cash flow can be okay. A lot of negative cash flow is not. It's something that you really need to reassess and say, well, maybe that's not the property for me. Unrealistic rent projections. I think I talked about this before. Where somebody said 1,700, I said, I'll be happy with 14. I got 13. All right. It was still okay because I felt like I could get the 14. I never wanted to use that company again, mainly because I didn't like that. I don't like, even though I knew as a realtor, I knew that. I knew people in that city. I knew people who had bought a lot of investment property there, and I felt pretty assured that's not going to be the case with you. So you need to get realistic rent projections, because otherwise, they're inflating the numbers just to get you to buy. Now, I hate to say that people are willing to do that, but come on. We know that in every industry and every kind of service. It really is the case. It chaps my ass, if you'll excuse my language, but it does happen. I don't want to see it. Conservatism here is the thing to do. And this is the situation I think I just talked about. It's just that agent lost my business. They could have had a lot more business if they would have just been honest with me in the first place. That's important for you to look at. Limited appreciation potential. If it's something that's not appreciating, and I can tell you cities that I know of and I won't, that aren't appreciating at this point, are appreciating at a very, very minor rate. You need 3%, you need 5%, you need 7%. You need a decent level for long-term growth. And again, you saw those St. Louis Federal Reserve graphs that you can do. You can find out on your own. You can say, well, I don't know about this. You say it's going to appreciate 10%. I ain't seeing that, and I have the chart to prove it. So we need to evaluate, what that can be. And there may be some value-added improvements that you can do that may make the appreciation go even greater. And your local person on the ground is going to be able to help you do that. So make sure you get a comparable sales, and a lot of comparables get at least a 5-year trend line. I recommend 10 or 20 years. Ask what around it could be a problem. The thing is, you may be buying sight unseen. I don't know if that's a good idea. And also realize cheap is not always a good thing. And we've gone through this before. You can get some bad renters, some high cost of doing business in this particular respect. Get a quality property, get quality tenants. Incomplete or misleading disclosures. Every state's going to be different. I can't really speak to a great extent on this. Review local records for past issues or disputes. But each state has its own rules and regulations. And so, some of it's just based on tort reform, so that, you limit the amount of what a lawsuit can be. And realtors, if I know something is wrong, I have to disclose it. I had a listing I didn't take because they said, I don't want you to tell anybody this. All right. But we sued the builder out of existence because of all of these substandard things that he did. But you can't say that. I have to say that. I have to be honest and transparent or I'll lose my license. So understand that. And get a complete home inspection. Don't trust disclosures. Don't trust a seller saying everything is okay. And subject everything you do to inspection so that you can get out of it if you find some serious problems. All right. That's pretty much the 10 red flags. I can tell you others, but I wanted to hit the highlights for you. Now, in the next section, I'm going to go through a case study because I want you to see how a real estate investment specialist goes through getting the right builder, the right property, and the right location, and working the numbers so that those numbers make sense to me, first and foremost, so that I can recommend it to you. So we want to do a real situation here so you can see why it was done, what the decision was made on, and then we're going to go through point by point and do together that Excel spreadsheet so that you know exactly what the numbers mean, why they're being put in, and then you can determine what makes sense to you based on those numbers so that you know that that investment specialist is going to be doing the same thing for you wherever you're buying. So thank you for listening in. Stay tuned. More to come.